Well, the Gaza ceasefire has come into effect after over 15 months of war. All eyes are on the hostage prisoner swap that will take place in a few hours from now. Hamas has named the 3 Israeli women hostages that it will release in a short while. The Israeli Prime Minister's office has confirmed that 4 other hostages will be released in 7 days. Israel will free 90 Palestinian prisoners. The Iran-backed group has asked Netanyahu's government to release the list of prisoners. Among the Israeli women hostages due to be released by Hamas are 24-year-old Romi Gonen, 28-year-old Emily Damari, and 31-year-old Doron Steinbrecher.
We've been fighting this fight for the past 15 months. We think that President Trump has made a real difference now, and his ultimatum really impacted what's going on. And we know how important international pressure is. So we really need to keep the pressure up.
Celebrations have begun across Gaza. Hundreds thronged the streets of Gaza to celebrate the historic day. Armed Hamas operatives paraded through crowds of Palestinians in the streets of Gaza, chanting in celebration after the delayed ceasefire. Now thousands of displaced Palestinians have started returning to whatever is left of their homes. Images show people checking the ruins of homes as they returned to the devastating region.
ما توقعناش نكون كل هذا الدمار في رفح. قعدنا يمكن 20 سنة واحنا بنبني في بيتنا. في لحظة يروح هيك حرام.
دمار هائل لا يوصف، دمار يعني لا يشهد له التاريخ من قبل ولا من بعد. حرب مجرمة ظالمة، لكن بإذن الله بالإرادة تاعتنا تاني وإيمانا بالله وبقوتنا هنرجع نبني ونعيد ونعيش بإذن الله.
Ahead of the prisoner hostage exchange, Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar addressed the public. He said that if the international community wants to contribute to a permanent ceasefire, it must include dismantling Hamas military power. He added that Israel is determined to achieve its objective and will move for further negotiations.
For us, it's important to achieve the objectives of the war. We are determined to achieve the objectives of the war. The war itself is not an objective, but if we will not have another choice but to use, again, military actions in order to meet the objectives of the war, we will do that.
197 trucks of aid and 5 of fuel have arrived in Gaza through the crossing of Kerem Shalom between Israel and Gaza. Egyptian Foreign Minister said 600 trucks a day would enter Gaza, including 50 carrying fuel. The Rafah crossing is the sole crossing point between Egypt and Palestinian Gaza Strip. The vital entry point for aid has been closed since May, and Israeli forces seized the Palestinian side. Now, according to reports, Israeli forces have started withdrawing from areas in Gaza's Rafah to the Philadelphia corridor, which Israel wants to retain control over. The corridor is a buffer zone between the Gaza Strip and Egypt. Meanwhile, in a huge setback for Netanyahu's cabinet, the Israeli far-right minister Ben-Gvir's party has quit the ruling coalition. The party of Israel's hardline national security minister says its cabinet ministers submitted their resignations from the government in opposition to the Gaza ceasefire deal. With the departure of the Jewish Power Party, Netanyahu's government now has 62 parliamentary seats in their 120-seat Knesset. While it does not affect the ceasefire, it does destabilize the coalition. Dr. Hassan Al-Hassan is a senior fellow for Middle East Policy, International Institute for Strategic Studies. He is now joining us live on this broadcast from Manama, Bahrain. Dr. Hassan, thank you very much for joining us at this critical hour, and it's good to see you. What happens next? Because that's the question in everyone's mind. What happens next from here? Do you have faith in Israel and Hamas adhering to the ceasefire deal?
So in the practical sense, what happens next is we see whether the sides of the agreement, Israel and Hamas, essentially abide by and adhere to the terms that they've committed to. And so we need to see whether the surge in humanitarian aid, whether the release of Israeli captives, the release of Palestinian prisoners and detainees, and the observation of the ceasefire are all actually upheld and implemented. And then a few weeks from now, we should start seeing the beginning of the negotiations for a second phase of the agreement, which would pave the way for another third phase that would lead to a permanent ceasefire, reconstruction, and a more long-term outlook for the Gaza Strip. Now, there are multiple challenges that the current ceasefire arrangement that's in place is likely to face. We know that there are many who are tempted to violate the terms of the ceasefire. We know that Israeli officials have already begun backtracking on Israel's commitment to withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor as part of this first phase of the agreement. There are those who are saying that Israeli forces will remain in place at the Philadelphia corridor, and this would be a violation of the ceasefire agreement. There are also concerns given the case of Israeli violations of the ceasefire in Lebanon, which is very close to the Palestinian case, where a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hezbollah was signed in November. And between November and mid-January, according to the Lebanese government, there have been at least over 470 Israeli violations of that ceasefire. So there are real concerns here about Israel's commitment to the ceasefire and whether the various parties adhere to what they've already committed to doing.
Right. Dr. Hassan, what do you make of this statement by Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar? He says, or he warns the international community against Hamas. He says there is no future peace, stability and security guaranteed for both sides if Hamas stays in power.
It seems like the Israelis want to have their cake and eat it at the same time. This is referring to the idea that this can be a phase one deal only, in the sense that how do you reconcile a permanent ceasefire with calls such as these to dismantle, disarm, and essentially destroy Hamas? It's very difficult to square these two things. However, this is a line of thinking that we've heard from the Israeli foreign minister. We've also heard it, by the way, from incoming U.S. National Security Advisor Waltz in an interview a few weeks ago. And so this, I think, is a line of thinking that is very difficult to reconcile. This idea that we're going to have a permanent ceasefire between Israel and Hamas and yet dismantle and destroy Hamas. It's very difficult, I think, to square that circle. Keep in mind, there are extreme right-wing figures who have been pushing Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to go back to war after the 33 Israeli captives are released. Let's remember that many of the protagonists, Israeli protagonists who have scuttled previous deals of the past, among them and chief among them, Prime Minister Netanyahu himself, are still at the helm in Israel. And Netanyahu himself has warned a few days ago that if he is unsatisfied with the progress of negotiations for a phase two, that Israel reserves the right to go back to war. So I think this is a problematic line of thinking, and I think it suggests that perhaps there isn't a real seriousness, a sincere desire to see this deal beyond its initial phase and to see it essentially develop into a permanent ceasefire.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. I've been talking to Dr. Hassan Al-Hassan. He's a senior fellow for Middle East Policy, International Institute for Strategic Studies. Thank you, Dr. Hassan.
Thank you.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.